We have all seen the triumphant story of the Transcontinental Railroad, a symbol of progress, of a nation forging its destiny in iron. This is not that story. This photograph captures the moment that triumphant story became a lie. It's the story of a world that was devoured to make it happen.
Welcome to Old West Unseen. Today we follow this line of iron, the advance of civilization as it was called. Not to celebrate it, but to uncover the brutal, forgotten story of the world it erased. This is the story of the true cost of the Transcontinental Railroad.
To understand what was lost, we must first understand what existed. For the Great Basin tribes, life was built on this, the single-leaf pinyon pine. As this 19th century botanical print shows, every part of it was understood and utilized.
But the pinyon nut was the most vital part, a source of protein so crucial. It was the buffalo of the Great Basin. Here, a Shoshone group gathers for the communal harvest, their lives moving to a sacred clock of seasons, not the ticking of a machine.
Their territories centered on vital water sources, like the Humboldt River. A place like 10 Mile Canyon wasn't just scenery. It was a seasonal camp, a pantry, and a sanctuary. A quiet moment in a world that ran on nature's clock.
Further west lived the Paiute. Though taken in a studio in the new town of Reno, this portrait shows the enduring strength of family. The baby, safe in its cradle board, represents a future and a culture passed down through generations. A continuity about to face its greatest threat.
In this companion portrait, we see Paiute men. Notice the mix of attire, traditional hairstyles paired with Western shirts. This wasn't surrender, it was adaptation. They were navigating a changing world on their own terms, even as that world was being built around them.
And to the south, the Dene, or Navajo, practiced arts that were ancient and profound. This complex loom, operated with incredible skill in canyon dechet, produced masterpieces of design. This was a world rich with culture and tradition, a world about to be torn apart. Into this world came the railroad. This map shows the route not as a suggestion, but as an arrow aimed at the heart of the continent. But this arrow wasn't fueled by a belief in destiny. It was fueled by silver. The unimaginable wealth of Nevada's Comstock lode demanded a faster path to profit, and this land was in the way.
The solution was to bring civilization with them. Construction trains weren't just for hauling rails. They were mobile workshops, kitchens, and dormitories. A self-contained industrial serpent, crawling across the desert with everything it needed for its relentless forward motion. But this machine was powered by muscle. Thousands of laborers, over 90% of them Chinese immigrants, did the back-breaking work. And look closer. Women and children are here too. Entire families caught in the gears of progress, their lives tied to the end of track as it pushed into the unknown. And where the track ended, a scar of a town would erupt from the dust. They called it hell on wheels. But the real hell wasn't just the vice or the violence. It was the chilling fact that this nightmare was temporary, designed to pack up and carry the infection further west.
The desert was flat, but the mountains were not. Conquering terrain like this required brute force. Rock formations that had stood for eons, like this profile rock, were casually blasted aside. The landscape was not an obstacle to be respected. It was a problem to be solved with dynamite and steel.
Through narrow canyons like this one, there was no way around. So they went through. Men, many of them Chinese workers, hung from cliffs to set charges, burrowing into the rock. Each foot of progress paid for with sweat, and sometimes with their lives. But the true cost was written on the land itself. To build the railroad, you had to follow the water.
And to follow it was to claim it. The Truckee River, the lifeblood of the Paiute for centuries, now became a simple corridor for the Central Pacific. The water was diverted, its ecosystem an afterthought.
This wasn't coexistence, it was conquest, a permanent scar proving that no corner of the West was too remote to be tamed and claimed by the industrial machine.
And what the land couldn't provide, the railroad brought. Nothing exposes the lie of taming the wilderness more than this. A water train, an entire locomotive draining one part of the ecosystem, just to build a new one somewhere else, leaving the land thirsty in its wake.
With the track came permanence. This 204-foot bridge over the Truckee River wasn't just a crossing, it was an artery. A declaration in timber and iron that the flow of commerce would now be constant and unstoppable. This is the very skeleton of the New West, and these arteries fed new hearts of commerce. The freight depot at Reno became a vital hub. Goods arrived by rail and were loaded onto endless lines of wagons, spreading the railroad's influence far beyond the tracks themselves.
Deeper in the desert, new outposts sprang into existence. At the Winnemucca Depot, the railroad controlled the flow of water completely. Without this depot, the town simply could not exist.
And here is the town itself. A few scattered buildings dwarfed by the ancient peak behind it. It's a stark reminder of how tenuous these footholds of civilization really were. Utterly dependent on the iron lifeline stretching across the desert.
And the process repeated. At Elko, 468 miles out, another boomtown is born. The motion blur of the people suggests frantic activity. Tents stand beside new structures. A new American town, rising from the dust because the railroad willed it to be there.
Finally, in places like Ogden, Utah, the conquest becomes official. A crowd gathers to celebrate a new bridge. This isn't a construction camp. It's a civic event. The train is no longer a threat, but a point of pride. The new world is here to stay.
Once the land was secured, the scientific expeditions arrived. In 1871, the Wheeler expedition set out to survey and catalog it, and photographed these Mojave men.
But listen to the official caption. It called them fine specimens, a chillingly detached term, as if they were merely part of the landscape's fauna, not men from a sovereign culture that was being erased. 3 years later, the same expedition photographed this Ute woman, Poggy. She is posed formally, taken out of her world and placed before a backdrop. No longer a person, but an ethnographic subject, an identity recorded for a government archive as her people's way of life was being systematically dismantled. These Ute braves were photographed in full dress. There's a profound tragedy here. Their sacred attire is presented as a costume for the historical record, the act of documenting something, precisely as you are ensuring it will soon cease to exist.
Even the land's most powerful features were subject to this cold analysis. Shoshone Falls, a place of immense spiritual power, was now just a geologic feature to be measured. Its height and width were recorded, but its soul was ignored.
And this is the end result. The vast Truckee Meadows, once a patchwork of native hunting grounds, is now bisected by the rigid, unyielding line of the railroad. The steam train sits in the valley, no longer a visitor, but the new, permanent master of the landscape. In the end, the railroad was built on the destruction of a landscape and the ruin of a culture. The piñon groves were stripped bare. The water was taken. A way of life was broken. And so we are left with this, a lone observer on his ancestral land, watching a train snake through a canyon that is no longer his. He is not watching the advance of civilization. He is watching his world disappear.
Thank you for joining us on Old West Unseen. The stories of the people who lived through this progress are carved into the landscape, if you know where to look. What other hidden stories of the West should we uncover next? Let us know in the comments. If you found value in this journey, we'd be obliged if you'd like this video and subscribe. Until next time, may your trails be clear.